Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Chagrin Documentary Film Festival panel with Lisa Molmot and Jeff Bemiss, co-directors, producers, and cinematographers behind Missing in Brooks County, an intimate and compelling and necessary look at our nation's silent mass disaster happening 70 miles off the U.S.-Mexico border. For a bit of backstory about Lisa and Jeff before we get started, Lisa is a documentary filmmaker based in Tucson, Arizona. She has been working in film for over 20 years, directing, filming, and editing documentaries. Her award-winning feature, The Hill, tells the story of an immigrant neighborhood in New Haven, Connecticut, and aired on PBS's America Reframed in 2015. Her award-winning shorts, School's Out and Teaching in Arizona, have had hundreds of screenings and been featured on Slate.com, in The Atlantic, and on NPR. As a Fulbright Scholar in the spring of 2019 at the International Migration Center at, I'm going to mispronounce this, is it the Balsillie School? Okay, excellent. The Vasily School of International Affairs in Ontario, Canada, where she worked on Safe Haven, a feature documentary about U.S. war resistors, deserters, draft dodgers who seek asylum in Canada, and Soldad, a short documentary mixing live action and animation about an asylum case. Lisa has taught filmmaking at Yale University and Wesleyan University, and she currently teaches at the James E. Rogers School of Law at the University of Arizona. Jeff is also a very accomplished award-winning, Oscar-shortlisted writer-director who has worked in shorts, features, and documentaries. His works have aired on network television and PBS, including The Book and the Rose and Coaching Colburn. Colburn is the correct pronunciation, right?
Yep.
Love it. Yay, exciting. Jeff is a graduate of the University of Southern California Film School and LA Stanford Meisner Academy. He's a Connecticut Artist Fellow and a Film Independent Fast Track Fellow. Jeff currently freelances for disability and social activist clients and teaches film at Trinity College in Connecticut. So what initially gravitated you to this subject, and how did you first discover what's been going on over in Brooks County?
Well, I think what got us started making this film was actually a radio documentary that we heard about a forensic scientist at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, named Lori Baker, who was doing exhumations of anonymously buried migrants in South Texas. And Lisa and I were both really just moved by the story. We had met at Trinity College in Hartford. We wanted to work together on something. So we reached out to Lori. She invited us out to Texas. We went down to this place called Falfurrias that we'd never heard of. And we said, okay, so where's the border? Show us the border. And she said, no. This isn't even a border county. That's 70 miles away. This is Brooks. But this is where the problem is. And I think that was the moment where Lisa and I began to realize that the story that really needed to be told was the story of what was happening, all the amazing things, not good amazing, that were happening in Brooks County.
Wow. How quick was this transformation of focusing on this anthropologist to completely twisting it and discovering the film? Because I know you guys worked on this throughout the course of 5 years, but when did the project pivot into this focus of all the complexities happening in this county?
I think the very first shot in Brooks County, honestly, we arrived, there was no border, we went out for fast food, for lunch, then we went to our first shoot, and I immediately different that this was going to be way more complex than we had initially thought. We continued to go to Brooks County every few months for the course of 4 years, and we just kept filming. Forming relationships, meeting people, trying to understand the story ourselves, but also find the right during the film. That was a little bit of a challenge to find the people who are ready to tell their story. It's a difficult story to share with the world. Managed to find the right family.
Awesome. Throughout the course of making this, had you guys had any stereotypes about our current immigration policy before the process of making this film? How did your perspective change throughout making it, and how do you hope your film changes or perhaps gets people questioning their own perspectives about where we lie with our immigration policies?
I mean, for me, I know that one thing I didn't expect was how much this was a bipartisan problem. I didn't realize that the Clinton administration had been really is the one most responsible for the migrant death situation, probably more than any other administration. Um, and it's just when you get into the immigration issue, sometimes the traditional assumptions of left and right in terms of politics, they get mixed up or they flip. One of the first and only at this point bill that has ever been passed where the government took at least some acknowledgement, some responsibility for this problem, was actually signed by Donald Trump on December 31st, at the end of his term. So that was something that surprised me. So I guess my hope is, and maybe people watching this will feel the same, if it's a bipartisan created problem, perhaps there can be a bipartisan solution.
I love this. And your film is, I feel like you can be on either side of the spectrum. You guys always have such a beautiful sense of openness and really just, it's just such a wonderful film to watch. I just want to throw in a little compliment there. Thank you guys so much for making it.
Another point I guess I want to say, which is, it's not political, but something that I think about, and I know other people are struck by watching this film, is I think when we are migrating to this country from Mexico or the Northern Triangle, think of it as a one-way trip. But the reality is life is complicated, families are complicated. People are, if you were maybe born in Mexico, but you migrated here at some point in your life, you may still have family back there. And so when a father is ill and dying, you may need to go back to say goodbye, and then you need to come back again. And on that trip back, we had been working with a family that had just this situation. The brother who went to this father went missing. So it's not about just people coming, from their home country to the U.S. for a better life. It's life is way more complicated than that, and people are going back and forth all of the time. Various. I think that's one thing to think about is someone who may have spent 25 years of their life in the U.S. had to go back to Mexico to say goodbye to someone, and on that journey on back to the U.S., back to his life here.
Wow. That's a really beautiful note to make. I didn't even really think about that, about people who have been living here for decades and then having to go back and forth and still finding difficulty with that. With your guys' previous work, did you feel like your guys' previous productions prepared you for this film in terms of like the emotional weight of the subject, and also just the fact that you guys are in a desert terrain? There's like a shot with like even a mighty truck just sinking into the sand, so I can't even imagine the physical elements to shooting as well as the emotional toll of the layers and seeing dead bodies and all of that. So how did you guys keep up your stamina and perseverance throughout making this film? Big question.
Nothing I did before this prepared for this. I think the film I'm most hopeful about is horrible children, are in kindergarten outside all day, in rain and snow and sleet, and they're always happy. So this was definitely, I have done films on immigration and immigrant communities, but even those didn't quite prepare me for this. Okay, and I'll let you take it from here.
It was a heavy shoot emotionally, and it did go on for a while. I think the fact that Texas is so big and we had these long drives, Lisa and I would talk about what we were shooting, and I think it also gave us a chance to process some of the really tough days in terms of just, the tragedy that we were documenting. And I think that was really important. I don't think I had worked on anything that had prepared me emotionally. And then in terms of just the technical, the filmmaking part of it, not at all. This really stretched both of us, I think. It was, sometimes we had, the conditions in the desert were, we would go on these long searches, and we had equipment that would fail and essentially melt and all kinds of other problems. It just was, we were constantly having to figure out how to meet the challenges of the filming conditions.
South Texas is very hot this summer, so very hot. It's very humid. And that kind of, and also we're not getting any younger. So.
Like, okay, we are pushing the capacity with all of the filmmaking assets and requirements.
I remember, Daniel, at one point we were out on a search, and we had to wear snake boots out there, and we asked the person leading the search, so what if someone in our group gets bitten by a rattlesnake? Where do we go? Which of the places in town has the anti-venom? And I remember the guy just laughed. He said, "There's no anti-venom in this town. You have to get on a helicopter and hope you get there fast." So it was
San Antonio, right? Which
yeah,
is
San Antonio. Yeah.
Gosh, wow, that's an extra level of wildlife encounters. Wow. Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
It really it gives you only a taste of what people migrating through this area have to face, and that's just one little thing. I mean, everything out there wants to bite you or sting you or chase you, or it's an inhospitable terrain.
Quick question. So actually this was my first time hearing about this weaponizing the land strategy. I had absolutely no idea that this was happening over in Texas, in the American Southwest, whether it's Arizona, California, Texas. Is this common knowledge that this is happening? Or even if you're in the area, is this something that no one knows is happening?
I think people in Tucson know. I live in Tucson, and this is, this has been going on here as well for decades. And Tucson is filled with community members who volunteer for different organizations. I'm trying to deal with this crisis here. I'm convinced the state is the country that really knows what's going on. So I happen to live in that community, but I think outside in Texas, when we were outside of South Texas, when we were what we're doing, they know either.
Right, and just to be clear, these checkpoints are nowhere near the border, the ones featured in the film. They are interior checkpoints, and most people don't know that we have such a thing unless you live where Lisa does or another border area. And yet there's over 100 of them across the United States, and 2/3 of the American population live inside a checkpoint zone, including my entire home state of Connecticut. They're just a weird result of a relatively obscure 1970s Supreme Court decision that has had all kinds of unintended consequences, including causing a substantial number of deaths, as you see in the film, and yet in all that time it's never been re-examined.
Wow, this is heavy stuff over here. I have another question about your guys' actually like filmmaking boots on the ground. It all feels so fluid and so well put together in the edit in terms of balancing all of these different elements to the story, whether it is the intimate details of the family, all these narratives of people working, border patrol, ranchers, and things like that. How much of being on set was just following everyone and just kind of being omnipresent as they were doing their jobs / kind of hunting for different details to later put in the film? What was your guys' balance like in capturing that on set?
I mean, the way I remember going to Brooks County trip after trip, we tried to plan stuff ahead of time. But the thing is, the culture in South Texas is different from the culture that I grew up with. And you can't really plan a lot. People always say, okay, let me know when you're here. So we would sort of drive, we would fly to Texas and then drive into town and then let people know we're around. And, like any verite film, you are kind of waiting for things to happen. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. So it was kind of a mix. Like, obviously, when the Romans decided they wanted to go back to Brooks County, we knew they were going back, and we, said, film you when you're there, that sort of thing. They were easy to plan with. They were very easy. But so much of it is like, we arrive and we, set up at the Best Western Hotel and wait for people to call us back. And then, of course, over the years, like, our connections with the community were stronger, and so people would reach out to us and let us know when things were happening. So over time, we sort of became more part of the community there, and people, knew what we were doing, and I think understood better what we were doing. Well,
that's amazing. That's really great that the community was so supportive of your project, because I feel like a lot of times when you're going into a community and you're not directly from there, there's usually a bit of, was there hesitancy initially when you guys started approaching the project, or was everyone just kind of very open to talk about their county and the issues within it?
I think it varied a little bit. I mean, the activists you see, the humanitarian workers like Eddie and Kate, were pretty open because they're used to having a parade of journalists coming and going. I think the difference between that, what they were used to, and what happened with Lisa and I is we just kept coming back. We just kept turning up over and over and over. And I think eventually they saw we were shooting a lot of footage and that we were working really hard. And pretty soon it felt like we were all telling the story together in a way. And I think that's how the trust got built. Now, it was a little different with Border Patrol, and it was a little different with Mike Vickers, the Texas Border Volunteer leader. He was initially, he was open to a certain extent, but he would always meet us out somewhere, and then it took us about 3 years of nagging him to get invited on one of those operations. So that took persistence.
Yeah. And also luck of when you guys were on this volunteer, hunt, if you will, that you guys they saw migrants during that time. So did you guys feel very lucky throughout the course of set? Just in terms of like the encounters that you guys had, like the whole like perfect timing feeling, or was everything always stressful? And if something went right, it was a good day?
I don't think I felt lucky. I felt like every time we arrived in Brooks County, someone would say to us, "Oh, you should have been here last week." And this happened. So that is documentary filmmaking. The minute you shut off the camera is when something happens. So, but no, I think really because we kept going back again and again and really forming relationships, I think we were able to film. And I'll give you an example. So we were filming with Border Patrol one day when they were looking for Juan, who was in the film. The young boy, the 18-year-old. And we were filming with Border Patrol searching one day. So we were on the roster to be with Border Patrol that day. But the next day we were not on the roster. And that is when they found him. But we happened to know the justice of the peace that was on call that day. So we called her up and we said, "Hey, I think they may have found Juan. I think you're probably going to be going out to report the situation, and then can we go with you?" And she said sure, because we had already filmed with her. We had already, she knew us very well at that point. And I think at first I was like, wow, we're really lucky, that worked out the way it did. But actually, when I think about it, it's more that we put in the time. Lots of different people, and so it just happened. Of course we knew someone, but we knew a lot of people at that point because we had been filming for a while, and so it was a little bit of luck, but it was a little bit of also just putting in the time and building relationships.
That's amazing.
And by the way, that story Lisa told, the second day, because we were not under the wing of the Border Patrol, but rather the local jurisdiction, Border Patrol didn't like it. We went up the chain and they called us and they said they were going to come and take our footage.
Oh, wow, really? Oh, that's very, so what was that conversation like, of having the debate of, we are meant to be here, this is our footage, please do not?
It was not much of a debate. That somebody from Homeland Security called and said that we can't ever show it or they'll come and confiscate it, and that's that. And we had to, get some advice.
Got it. With that comment of just like missing footage throughout the documentary, were there any moments that you had to delete in the cut, like the usual kill your darlings, like moments that you really miss and wish were in the film but just couldn't fit due to just the overall edit?
Oh, my favorite scenes are not in the film.
Oh.
But you have to choose the things that serve the story. So I tried to get them in there. I mean, you try over time, but then you let go of certain things because you want to serve the story. So I would say my favorite scenes are not in the film. But the filming of any film is an experience. It's not just the film. And so I often felt like we were filming stuff that I kind of knew maybe wouldn't make it into the final film, but I still was really interested in what was going on. And I think that's okay. We have to let everyone know when you're done with the film who didn't make it in. That's hard, but it's you don't quite know at the time when you're filming. You kind of have a sense, and it's a really interesting part of the country. I mean, there was so many characters and so much that was new to me that I think I couldn't resist filming lots of things that really weren't part of the story.
And just real quickly, also the sheriff of Brooks County, Benny Martinez, is someone we filmed with and who is really at the hub of so much that's happening regarding the missing migrant situation. And yet he did not end up in the film. And it's just like Lisa said, it's one of those things that happens when you do a film. You can't put everything in.
Right. It becomes a bit of an impossible mission, especially when you're working on it for 4 years. Like, I can't even imagine how much footage you guys had. That must have been wild in terms of the approach with editing it and everything.
The editor is not here. He's one of the other producers of the film. But, it was great to have someone with fresh eyes watch all of the footage and his thoughts about all of this, because of course we wanted to try to fit everything in. We were there and we were filming and a certain attachment to a lot of things, but he was much more objective. So that was helpful. And also just as a director, it's great to step away and let someone work on it and then come back and watch it and done. And go, okay, never would have thought of that. Okay, great.
Right. I have a little emerging filmmaker question for you guys. So what was your guys' origin into the world of filmmaking? What got you interested in filmmaking and got you guys into the profession?
Well, okay, for me, I think I always wanted to do it ever since I saw Star Wars as a young person. It just set my imagination on fire, and I went to film school, and then I think at some point I decided that I maybe wasn't into the workaday industry side of it as much. And then as an indie, I got a little bit tired of waiting for investors so that you could do scripted work because you need so much money really just to start. And I thought, well, I'll try doc because if you have an idea and a camera and you know how to turn it on, you can just kind of go and get started. And for me, that was the entry to that. And by the way, I also want to shout out to our editor, Jacob, who I agree with everything Lisa said. I mean, his perspective was invaluable, really, in shaping, the narrative, because it wasn't at all clear how everything was going to fit together.
He's based in Tucson, so I think that he really made leaps forward when I actually left for Toronto for 4 months and I was no longer here, and he could just be by himself with the footage, and I was more remote. And I think there is something to be said by just letting someone else come in and give their perspective on things. So.
Right. Oh, I love it.
And my story is, it's different, totally different. I had a liberal arts college experience. I took a lot of studies. And when I got out of college, my first job was with the documentary maker, San Francisco, and I was interested in documentary just from a study side, but then hands-on from her and from experiences I was having on from there. But so I think there are just so many different paths into this profession.
I feel like it's often very organic, and that beautiful combination of hard work and luck and meeting the right person at the right time and all of that jazz. Do you have any recommendations for emerging filmmakers in the documentary format of how to get started, how to find people who you love and think the same way you do, want to collaborate, and then of course just the funding in order to get the project off the ground?
Make a film.
Right.
make a short film or make a film. I mean, I think getting mentors. I mean, I had a mentor. I think mentors are really important when you're starting out in any profession. The things I would recommend.
Yeah, that's good advice. Mentors and collaborators, I think, and make a film. If if you want to be a director, you should probably direct something. And if you're doing scripted film, I mean, I look back at the people I was at film school with, and those who are working at the highest level in terms of actually writing and directing, they were writers. I mean, they really came from a writing background, because when you write something, if it's good and people want it, you have some leverage, you have some power, you control that thing, as opposed to being a director or whatever for hire, where, you're kind of, I guess you're kind of dime a dozen in a way. So writing is not a bad way to go.
Love that. Do you guys have any favorite documentaries? Whipping out the favorites questions.
I mean, I do have a lot of documentaries that I have loved over the years. I mean, Agnes Varda is one of my inspirations, just because, such an amazing fiction filmmaker, but also documentary as well. And I just so organically herself, and I don't know, I just love her films, and they feel good, and
Oh, I love that. I love Jane B. Per Agnes B. Her documentary. It's so wonderful. How about you, Jeff? Any favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little. I actually come from more of a scripted background, but yeah, I like a lot of the big documentaries that you see. I guess I love Michael Moore's documentaries. I think they're such an interesting, combination of humor and satire, and the way he weaves all his themes together. But I also love investigative documentaries, and some of the stuff that, and the adventurous ones too. Laura Poitras has done some great stuff, and I mean, I always feel like if you watch the biggest award-winning documentaries of the year, you're almost sure to have, they're going to be perfect. I mean, every one of them is going to be perfect. There won't be a bad one in the lot. They're usually, for a documentary to rise to the top in any given year, it has to be really, really good.
Mm-hmm. There's a film that I watched many years ago called Dear Zachary. I don't know if you've seen it. But it was one of these documentaries that was so devastating. I mean, I will never forget that film. And I have recommended it to people who have said the same thing to me. Like, I will never forget that film. It just changes somehow. And, the making of this film, I don't know if this film reaches that level, but the making of this film has changed me, I have to say. I think, and it really, we were working on it for so long, witness some of the things we witnessed, and to sort of in this story for so long, it really, it just changes a little bit the way you feel about your country. It changes, I think, of humanity a little bit, and it makes you angry. It makes you angry that this is happening.
How about you, Jeff? Has this also been a life-altering, changing experience in that way as well?
Yeah, I would have to say that it has. I mean, Lisa and I do talk about this a little bit. I think we both probably have admitted that maybe we were a little bit happier people before shooting this. But you have to hope that maybe if people will, I mean, that's really why we made the film. I mean, the idea was, if people, including leaders and lawmakers, could meet the families of the missing, maybe they will feel differently about the policies that they're creating, because suddenly they'll understand the impacts of the laws that they're passing.
Absolutely. Your guys' speaking of just like the impact and overall aftermath of your guys' film, your guys' impact campaign is fantastic. I feel like you guys have done such an amazing job really getting to as many film festivals as possible, having these lovely huge expansive screenings throughout the state of Texas. Was that always just a huge have you guys done impact campaigns before? Was this like a first time endeavor for you guys? I feel like you guys have been so successful in just getting the word out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, it takes effort. And unfortunately, I think in the past, my impact campaigns have been much, much smaller and limited because of resources and extra or whatever the situation is. But Jeff and I have been fortunate to take some impact training from Canales, who runs a company called Look Pictures, and it's been about 6 months that we've been in this course, and it was, I think, a necessary thing for us to do, because I don't think either of us have done anything remotely close to this, and just having that support and impact. And I think it's going to be many years of working on impact for this film.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you guys so much for making it. I know this is we're not supposed to do favorites, but I loved your guys' film, and it was honestly like one of my favorites, because just coming from, I've had, the ability to be able to travel for work living in the South and the East Coast and abroad and over here in Ohio, which is where I'm initially from. I feel like there's so many misunderstandings in terms of the narratives and cultures of people who are migrating into our country. And I feel like your film is so important and that we all need to see it. And it's such a beautiful, impactful, intimate tale. So thank you guys so much for going through all of the stress and strain of making this film, and in addition to just the emotional toil that, that comes with making documentary films. So thank you guys.
Thank you for showing our film.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So let me see if I have any last questions for you guys. So this is your guys' first collaboration together, right? Is there more to come? Do you guys have anything else upcoming, or just mainly focusing on the usual grind and getting this particular documentary out into the world?
It is so hard for me to think about the next project, because we're so knee-deep in Missing in Brooks County, but I hope it's not the first time we work together, and I hope we can collaborate again. But I really also hope that we really do this film justice and get it out into the world in all the ways that we hope for, and that's a lot of time.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. Exactly the same way.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this expanded conversation with your film Missing in Brooks County. Do you guys have any last words for the audience? Any action steps? How can we get involved? How can we further promote and support your film, and support the people of Brooks County and just get the message out there for this?
Yeah, well, one thing that people can do if they're moved by the stories in the film and they want to do something is, a simple thing would be to support Eddie Canales' work at the South Texas Human Rights Center. He's often, he sometimes gets interns, but usually it's just him, and he's the only one who has humanitarian operation based in Brooks County. And I know he could always use some financial support for putting the water out in the desert and the other things he does.
Yeah, so you can just go onto our film's website, Missing in Brooks County, find the donation link to Eddie's website, or you can Google South Texas Human Rights Center and go immediately to his website.
Awesome. Oh, well, this has been such a treat. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat with us here at the Chagrin Documentary Film Festival. And everyone watching, we hope you get a chance to watch the film through our virtual cinemas and continue to support this film getting the word out, and check out their website and support the, that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.